Hey everybody, Culture Craig here, and I am going to break down the 2023 Gallup's State of the Workplace report today. This is that report that comes out every year. It's one of the most referenced reports, and there's a lot in it. So I thought I'd take a few minutes to go through it, talk about the highlights, give you a couple concepts, and an easy way to digest it quickly so you know what's going on and you feel up to speed and you know what the latest research is. So come on and join us for today's Going Through the Data. But before we get started, look, building this website, building out my YouTube channel. So please, I'd appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe. There's a subscribe button. Also, you can hit the bell. That way you'll get notified if more comes out. But let's get to the report. All right, so here it is, the State of the Global Workplace 2023. If you're in employee engagement, if you're in HR, you've probably been hearing this. You've probably been referencing it or heard it referenced. And I feel like I'm even a little late to the game, but I've been spending some time looking at it, and I thought it'd be good to go through, kind of highlight the key points, so somebody can quickly absorb it and just stay on top of what's going on. So let's go ahead and get to this. Look, we open with a letter from the CEO. So there's a couple things I want to call out in that letter from the CEO. First is they quote I think he's the head of the global bank, and he says that a lost decade could be in the making for the global economy. What am I reading to this? They're basically making the case that it's predictable that it's going to be a challenging decade ahead. As we all know, that things are getting tight, things are changing. So that's the prediction they're making. But what I think is interesting here is that it also calls out this cost. And, I hear people throw around numbers a lot, but I do think there's something to this, right? If you look at the number here, what does it say? $8.8 trillion is what they think low engagement is going to cost the global workplace. 9% of the global GDP. Look, big numbers, humongous numbers. I think a couple things here that I want to drive home, and that is it's still connecting the dots that focusing on engagement is focusing on the bottom line. And also, that's such a big number that every single one of you owns a little piece of that, right? That's so many dollars. So if you are a medium to large size organization, there's some money in there, millions of dollars that it's costing you through engagement. So it's making that case. And I think finally what really stood out to me at the end of the letter from the CEO, he says, so what can leaders do today to potentially save the world? I mean, this is their big, bold statement. Gallup has found one clear answer: change the way your people are managed. I think this is the most direct and clear call out I've seen to the managers and how we manage the future. And I've often said, I think the future is fewer managers. I think we need to lessen this idea of management, but we need to focus more on managers and management. How are we interfacing between the leaders of our organization and our managers who are being asked to bring that out to the employees? It's a whole new world, and I think we're expecting our managers to continue to operate as they did in the Industrial Revolution, and that's simply not the case anymore. And they make that really direct case. So they go on, and there's 7 main points. So I'm just going to walk through them. I think some are a little more poignant for me than others. Point 1, look, number 1, the percentage of the employees, this is so interesting to me, the percentage of employees thriving at work has reached a record high. Record high. Look at that number. It's 23% engagement is a record high. Fewer than a quarter of our employees are engaged, and that's a record high. They're not necessarily calling it out as such a good thing, but I think it's so interesting that like where we stand and how we think about this. But I also want to call out that a major part of that was the 7% was the Southeast Asia, which is India. So India has really been coming online. It's going to be one of the biggest working forces in the world soon. And as they've been doing that, employee engagement is being measured and it's going up. That's been lifting it. So I would say, even if we strip that out and say, wow, highest it's ever been, 23%, everybody, we've got a lot of work to do if we're talking about building great workplaces. If we believe that engagement is tied to happy people, effective workplaces, and successful workplaces, there's so much opportunity here, and that's just being called out front and center. All right, point number 2. Oh, goodness. I had a lot of fun with this one. So look, the majority of the world's employees are quiet quitting. And when I read this, I've always struggled with this idea of quiet quitting. No one has been able to tell me why it's any different than people basically not engaged at work. So I saw this at first. I'm like, all right, interesting. Let's dig in. Maybe Gallup's really going to open it up. And what I saw here, I think it just calls out my point. All they did was stick these terms we're using today on top of what we've been saying. Look at the bottom here. Engaged, not engaged, actively disengaged. We've been seeing those terms for a long, long time. Now it's thriving at work, quiet quitting, and loud quitting. But it's still to my point that I almost think this drives home my point. This quiet quitting thing has been around for a long time. We're just repackaging. But what I do want to call out is, look at that, 59% are quiet quitting. 60%, close to 60% are those not engaged employees. That's a lot of people and a lot of opportunity. Oftentimes when I'm reviewing results with organizations, I have them focus a lot on the middle, right? Not because it's so easy to think about your top performers, or your the highest engaged, and then the lowest engaged, and that middle gets left out. This is the gold mine. It's that middle, and it's where we need to be focusing more. And they're the ones that are most easily swayed. Pulling over and we're focusing on getting those not engaged to engaged is only going to pull all the way across. So that calls out, and that just reiterates what I think we've seen for a long time and drills home this idea of there's a lot of room to grow and there's a lot of opportunity here. So we're going to move on to, let's see here, point number 3. So point number 3, the main point here is, although the world has recovered from the pandemic, employee stress remains at a record high. So well-being, right? This conversation, we're talking about well-being. Let's just pull up here. This is a graph showing where it is. So it continues to go up. I mean, 44% of people are saying, did you experience a lot of stress more than the day before? That's a really high number. But what I really want to call out here is with this graph and what they call out, and that is this relationship between engagement and well-being, that for those that are engaged, it's at 30%, much lower. For those that are actively disengaged, it's up to 56%. So again, focusing on this idea of engagement and seeing the relationship between engagement and stress levels. I also have been talking a lot about this around burnout, and this idea that burnout's not a static thing, right? If I am really engaged in my job and really focused and feel like I have a part and a role and all those things that go into it, I'll probably work a lot harder and still not feel burnout. If I'm really stressed, I don't feel I'm being led well, I don't understand what's going on, and being asked to work, I could be working a lot fewer hours and be way more overwhelmed. So I think that's a really interesting concept, that when people are engaged, there's a lot more coming out. And it's almost a barrier against that well-being, because I know that people will work a lot harder and more focused and enjoy that when they're engaged. So big point there. Point number 3. Point number 4, the world's experienced widespread insurgence in jobs. I didn't find this one. I mean, this is neat. I'm sure there's people that like this. Economists, what does it say? To me, it's a sentiment question. It just shows that people are feeling very positive, that there's work out there, there are jobs out there, at least in the sentiment. And this is a direct sentiment question, asking people how they feel about the outlook and about jobs. So positive, good to know that people are that's on the rise and people are feeling positive about employment opportunities. Point 5. So globally, over half of employees express some level of intent to leave their job. 51% of your people are probably thinking about leaving, at least at the global scale. We can dig into that with organizations. I think a big point here is, guess what? Ask people and you can learn a lot. There's a question that's often asked in engagement surveys is, I see myself here in 2 years' time. Simply asking that question is one of the most direct relationships to turnover. And I think it's funny that so many organizations do all this work and all this analysis to predict turnover, and simply asking the question gets you just as much information. So that's really important. But you know what's more important here? It's that same relationship, which is looking at those that are engaged versus disengaged. When you're engaged, it's 43%. People saying they're actively thinking about leaving, they're looking for a new job. And when people are disengaged or actively disengaged, it's at 61%. Why do I show this? Again, making the case, if you don't think engagement is important, it's directly related to turnover. Go do the numbers. It doesn't take long. Turnover is probably one of your biggest expenses. So you can do all kinds of weird things to try to address it, or you can focus on the input factor, which is engagement. Work on your engagement. What drives that? Your outcome is going to be lower turnover. This has been shown time and time again. And once again, here we see it. So something to be thinking about if you're questioning, or if your leaders are questioning, what's the value of investing in these sorts of engagement activities. So that's point number 5. Point number 6 is engagement has 3.8 times as much influence as employees' stress as work location. Okay, let me pull up a graph. Let me pull up a graph here and show you something. There's a lot here. I think the main point's really important, though. You're looking there against fully remote people, hybrid people, and on-site people, looking at their engagement scores and stress levels. It does show that overall stress is lower for people that identify as on-site. So stress levels go down going into the office. However, across the board, regardless, by the way, also I think it's interesting that hybrid's higher than fully remote. But across the board, in the office, out of the office. And look, my take on that is still listen to your people, make an educated decision. Don't just do it because one person has an idea of what it needs to be. I think there's different things for different organizations, and how do we look and analyze that and make the best case. But engagement is 3.8 times higher influence on employee stress at work. I would focus on your employee well-being, your engagement as much, if not more, than all the where are people working. Like, let's use where they work as a input towards engagement to make the right decisions, to get people in the right space. Maybe it's some sort of hybrid. I don't know. That's a conversation I have with a lot of organizations, helping them understand what's best for them and not just flying by the seat of their pants or because one particular executive has an opinion, but using data to do that. But again, what does this drive home? That employee engagement is a much stronger driver of overall stress, not location. So just helping you prioritize and think about where to focus. All right, point number 7 and the final point, quiet quitting employees know what they would do to change about their workplace. I like this one. Why do I like this one? Because they hit on another point. They show it here. Let me pull them both up. They basically asked those quiet quitters, those people in the middle, what would you do to change it to make it better? And this is what they came out with. 41% said it's something to do with engagement and culture. So culture, Craig, here to work with you, engagement and culture. But pay and benefits were there. I'll tell you something about pay and benefits. When we analyze pay and benefits, it is not a strong driver of engagement. People will identify that they clearly we all want more money, but we do know that in most cases, more money is not going to change or move the needle on engagement. And then well-being, so focusing on well-being. But what's the bigger point here? They will tell you if you're willing to ask and you're willing to listen. Your people can tell you what you need, which goes back to that last point I made about just asking people to find out about turnover. So again, a really good point. And I think that the underlying thing here is why don't you ask and then you can learn. So let's get to the summary here. They summarize a couple things. One, in today's typical organization, most employees are neither engaged nor actively disengaged. They are sitting in the middle and they go out of their way. And I think one of these next points calls that out, that's our opportunity. Employee engagement does not mean happiness. What are they talking about here? This is an interesting one, but I think maybe easily confused engagement and happiness. People can be happy and not engaged. Believe me, there are people that make a lot of money that don't do a lot of work. They're probably pretty happy, but they're not very engaged. So don't confuse the two. Focus on engagement through the areas of stay, right? Do they see themselves at your organization? Are they happy? Do they speak highly of your organization? Would they recommend you and thrive? Would they willing to go above and beyond? That's a much stronger identifier of engagement than looking at happiness or contentment. Number 3, what I say, quiet quitting employees are your organization's low-hanging fruit for productivity gains. I love seeing this because it just hit on something I talk about so often with organizations when they're looking at their data is, don't miss out on those middle groups. They're easily overlooked. The neutrals, our brain goes to positive or negative very easily. But your real opportunity is in that group and understanding that group and focusing on that group and moving them over to the engaged and not to the actively disengaged, who are people that are pulling away from your organization and making things more difficult. And finally, the manager is the linchpin of engagement, which also hits on something I've been saying for a long time. The future is the manager, and we have to reduce management. Nobody tells you, you don't need a manager to help run your life, to take care of your children, to take care of your parents, whatever it might be. But we have 4 layers of management in our organizations. It's too much. It doesn't align with how humans operate, and we manage a lot on our own. So how do we remove that idea of management, but also enhance our managers, support them, get them better at listening and talking to their employees, and coming up with one-off strategies around growth and development and all those things. So I hope this was helpful. I've been wanting to do it for some time. I'm not sure how long that took, but hopefully it wasn't too long. And we have a great overview and you got something out of it. Love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below. Was this helpful? Would love to do more of these moving forward when these reports come out. But that was what I wanted to do, helping out, summarizing fast some of the most cutting edge, front and center research that everybody's thinking about. You'll hear more from me. Hope you're well. Let's keep building great, engaging workplaces. Thanks a lot.